On a cold February afternoon, in 1985, in the sleepy hills of Winfield Township, Pennsylvania, a 9-year-old girl vanished into thin air, swallowed by silence just moments after stepping off her school bus. Her name was Cherrie Mahan, and her disappearance would become one of the most haunting and unresolved mysteries in American true crime history. That day, the snow had fallen gently over the rural roads, blanketing the earth in what felt like innocence. But beneath that quiet surface, something malevolent waited coiling in the shadows, watching, ready. Within minutes, a neighborhood turned from routine to horror. Parents who had just been warming cocoa began hunting in panic. Officers combed woodlands and icy ditches with flashlights slashing through the dusk. But there was no trace. Not a footprint. Not a scream. Only the distant memory of a girl with brown eyes and a smile that was about to become a ghost. Cherrie had been just steps from her front door when the world swallowed her whole. Witnesses, including children on that same bus, recalled seeing her descend near her driveway, that signature denim skirt brushing her knees under her pastel coat. Her house stood just over a small rise, nestled behind a line of trees barely stripped from winter's breath. But she never made it home. Instead, a van, an old, boxy Dodge with a mural of a skier cascading down a mountain, was spotted near the scene. Its strange presence, glaring and out of place in the rural quiet, etched itself into frightened memories. Authorities would later plaster that van across posters, news bulletins, and milk cartons, hoping its peculiar image would pull truth from the shadows. But no one came forward. No one claimed to have seen her again. And the van, like the girl, vanished, leaving a trail of frostbitten questions in its wake. In the days that followed, the community transformed into a living search grid. Police helicopters sliced through gray skies overhead, their blades echoing off the hills like a ticking countdown. Volunteers trudged through snowfields and tangled underbrush, boots crunching the cold earth where her small shoes had never left a mark. Bloodhounds sniffed the air for a scent already fading into the wind, their handlers shouting her name on repeat like a forgotten hymn. Every culvert was checked, every shed unlocked, every treehouse explored with cautious hearts. She always came straight home. Her mother, Janice, told reporters, her voice fraying under blankets of fear and frost, "I saw her get off that bus." But hope began to calcify into dread. No signs of struggle. No dropped belongings. Not even a broken twig. It was as if Cherrie had stepped off the earth entirely, carried away by something or someone who had memorized the sound of an opportunity before it screamed. The suspect list was a fog of half-formed names, and shifting speculation a swirl of whispers that spiraled through town like smoke from a slow-burning fire. Local rumors pointed fingers at strangers, at neighbors, even at shadows from the family's past. Cherrie's biological father, Leroy McKinney, who had once lived a troubled life in Michigan but was long estranged, became an immediate focus. Though he had no custody and little contact with his daughter, investigators could not ignore the possibility of a paternal link, no matter how tenuous. He was questioned repeatedly, his alibis checked and rechecked, but no concrete evidence ever surfaced that tied him or anyone else to the girl's vanishing. FBI profilers circled around chilling possibilities. Was the abduction an act of random predation, carefully timed and impeccably executed? Or had someone been watching Cherrie for weeks, maybe years, waiting for the precise moment her steps fell out of view? The van, vivid and bizarre, seemed like more than just transportation. It felt like a taunt, an artwork hiding a crime. Yet even that clue led to dust. Over 4 decades later, no trace of Cherrie has been found, and the skier on the van might as well have melted into air. The image of that van, painted with surreal calm while cloaking something so sinister, burned itself into the consciousness of a nation, appearing on billboards, in police sketches, and in the minds of every parent whose child ever walked alone. But years passed. Seasons turned. Hope faded into folklore. Janice Mahan, Cherrie's mother, became the stoic figure at the center of this endless winter. A woman refusing to let her daughter vanish completely into memory. She went on television. She gave interviews. She kept her number listed. "If she's out there," she once whispered, clutching her daughter's school photo that had long since curled at the edges. "I need her to know I never stopped." But the silence never broke. No ransom, no body, no confession. The road where Cherrie disappeared became sacred ground, marked only by the ache in the air and the hollow echo of a little girl's last known footsteps. And still, the question hung fractured but unforgotten. How does a child disappear in daylight and leave behind nothing but shadows? 2 weeks after Cherrie vanished, a chilling moment rippled through the investigation. A postcard arrived, not to the Mahans, but to a distant relative. It bore no return address, no fingerprints, no leads, just 7 words in block handwriting that seemed extracted from a fever dream. "I know who has Cherrie Mahan." The ink bled slightly at the corners, smudged by what could have been water or time. Detectives treated it with utmost caution, sending it through forensic labs, dusting it for DNA, analyzing the slant of each letter as if truth hid in the tilt of a pen. But like everything else, it ended in a dead-end street. Many believed it was a cruel prank, a taunt from someone dancing on the edges of empathy. Others feared it was real, a ghosted whisper from the darkness that had taken her. For Janice, it wasn't the words that haunted her, it was the silence that followed them, that whoever wrote it, if they knew anything, had never spoken again. In the months that followed, tips trickled in like rain on parched soil, each one stirring brief storms of hope before drying into disappointment. Psychics called, strangers claimed sightings. A woman in Oklahoma swore she served a girl with Cherrie's eyes at a highway diner. Another in Tampa believed her neighbor's adopted daughter bore an uncanny resemblance. Lead after lead, call after call, investigators chased them across state lines, across decades. They knocked on doors, searched apartments, dusted photographs for resemblances that never quite matched. Time became both a guardian and a prison. With every passing year, possibility narrowed, faces aged, memories blurred. Yet for Janice, the agony of not knowing remained untouched by the years. "It's the not knowing that kills you," she once told a documentary crew, her gaze fixed on a horizon only she could see. "If she's dead, I want to bury her. If she's alive, I want to hold her. But this is limbo. This is hell." By the time the 1-year anniversary arrived, Winfield Township had stopped holding its breath, but Janice Mahan had not. The neighbors no longer searched the woods behind their barns. The school bus rumbled past that same stop every morning, doors opening for children whose parents clutched them a little tighter. But for Janice, hope had not yet curdled into surrender. She created a foundation in Cherrie's name, distributed buttons, t-shirts, pamphlets, anything to ignite recognition in a forgotten face. Her persistence became its own kind of monument, forged in grief and motherly defiance. The media would revisit the case in waves, each decade triggering retrospective reports filled with headlines like, "Gone without a trace," or "Michigan woman might be Mahan." But nothing ever stuck. No answers. Only swirling theories: child trafficking, mistaken identity, a staged disappearance, even alien abduction. None could compete with the single truth that haunted every creak of that rural road. Cherrie was gone. But she had not gone willingly. Someone had taken her. And someone had kept their secret for 40 years. 4 decades have come and gone, and still the portrait of Cherrie Mahan remains frozen in time, a 9-year-old girl suspended in a moment that never aged. Her photo, now digitally enhanced to suggest what she might look like at 49, gazes out with a haunting familiarity, as if staring back through layers of lost years. Investigators continue to revisit the case, spurred by advances in forensic technology and sporadic new tips, but each step feels like turning pages in a book that refuses to end. Artificial intelligence has been used to age her image, to analyze linguistic patterns from old letters, to retrace vehicle records with datasets that didn't exist in 1985. Yet the mystery remains sealed, and Janice, though grayer now and slower in speech, still holds a room filled with Cherrie's childhood, the posters, the toys, the belongings, untouched by adulthood. In every interview, her voice holds a determined echo. "I still believe. I will always believe. As if hope, like her daughter, never really let go. But perhaps the strangest twist came not from a tip, a clue, or a breakthrough, but from a single phone call in 2011. A woman in Michigan claimed she believed, down to her bones, that she was Cherrie Mahan. She said she had seen her age-progressed photo on a missing persons website, and something within her soul cracked open. Officials met with her, asked questions molded from decades of doubt and desperation. DNA was collected. The anticipation was excruciating, enough to stir national headlines. Could this finally be her? For weeks, a family tiptoed that thin line between redemption and ruin. But the tests came back negative. She was not Cherrie. Another grieving mother, another daughter in limbo, another door closing with a quiet finality. And through it all, Cherrie Mahan kept her candle burning. "I'm still waiting," she said, through tears that had waited decades to fall. "She's out there. I can feel it." And so the story remains suspended, not in ending, but in echoes, drifting through time like footsteps that stop too soon. The years may wear away memories, but they have not dulled the ache that smolders quietly in the hearts of those who still remember her name. Cherrie Mahan, forever 9. Forever missing. Her story persists not only in the silence she left behind, but in the noise of all that continues in her absence. The unwrapped birthday gifts, the untouched Christmas stockings, the unanswered questions echoing through a hollow of time. In classrooms across America, her case became a whisper, a warning, a sorrow-soaked lesson tucked into lessons about safety. But to her mother, and the few who refused to let her slip into the cracks of a forgotten era, Cherrie is more than a file or a face on a flyer. She is memory made flesh, hope that denies time its final word. And until someone speaks the truth, until the earth exhales her secrets and the shadows surrender their keeper, Cherrie Mahan is still out there, waiting to be found. Where silence once ruled, justice waits to be written. In the deep vaults of unresolved memory, Cherrie's name echoes like a bell in an empty church, clear, mournful, and impossible to ignore. Her case shaped how America viewed child safety, inspiring the first use of mass-distributed photos of missing children on direct mailers, a model now used across the nation. Her face, with eyes wide open to a world that vanished beneath her feet, became one of the earliest in the country's mass missing kids campaign, her image radiating from grocery store walls and mailboxes like a sacred icon of lost innocence. Law enforcement credits her case with helping launch the "Have You Seen Me?" program, though terribly, tragically, she was never one of the found. What was once singular sorrow became systemic vigilance. Yet for every law created, for every awareness campaign launched in her wake, the gnawing absence of closure remains. In a world of answers built on data and technology, Cherrie Mahan's name is carved not into stone but into wind, impossible to hold, impossible to forget. Her story is not just a mystery, it is a promise, yet left unfulfilled, that disappearance is not disappearance if memory refuses silence, and those haunted hills of Pennsylvania still listen, still wait, for a voice to pierce the cold and say, finally, what happened on that February day? Beneath the frostbitten threads of this American tragedy lies a deeper, more painful question, one without footnotes or neatly tied conclusions. It is the question that keeps porch lights burning long after midnight, that causes a mother to glance at the face of every woman walking past her in a crowd, half hoping, half dreading. What if she's still alive? What if the world forgot? But she remembers. Somewhere beneath another name, in another town, behind unfamiliar eyes, does Cherrie know she was once a girl who vanished in the snow? Or has the truth been buried so deep beneath years of silence and survival that even she cannot recall the echo of her own name? The beauty and the cruelty of time is that it moves on even when justice does not. And so, in that quiet corner of Pennsylvania, where the snow still falls just as it did in 1985, one question continues to whisper through the pines, not just who took Cherrie Mahan, but where, if anywhere, is she now? As the years unfolded, and theories grew brittle with repetition, cold case investigators and retired detectives still found themselves waking to thoughts of Cherrie. Her absence followed them like a shadow, a riddle that refused to dull its edges. Some kept her photograph in their wallets, others on the bulletin boards of old precinct walls, as if invoking her memory might summon the truth. Retired Corporal John Dunlap, the lead investigator in the early days, once said in an interview, "This case never left me. It's like she's asking for someone to keep looking." He died in 2020 without answers. Still, others picked up the file, sifted through reports yellowed by time and thumbed bare with sorrow. Cadaver dogs returned to the forests with new techniques. Search and rescue drones flew low over the twisted landscape that had hidden her so well for so long. It wasn't just about evidence anymore, it was about redemption, about giving history the closure it refused to write. Somewhere out there, buried deep in silence or memory or guilt, lies the truth. And while the years may stretch endlessly forward, for those who remember Cherrie Mahan, not just the girl who vanished, but the symbol of everything stolen too soon, the search will never stop, because vanishing doesn't mean erasing. Not when love, memory, and justice still have a story to finish. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world is suspended in its gentlest silence, a mother still waits for the sound of a key in a lock that never turned, for footsteps never made. Cherrie Mahan's story is not folded neatly into the archives of lost children. It lingers, hovering between presence and absence, justice and oblivion. Every missing child is a reopened wound for Cherrie Mahan, for those who once joined search parties with frozen fingers and breaking hearts. What began as one case blossomed into a legacy of awareness, of prevention, but most of all, of love that endures through time's relentless forgetting. 40 years have blurred the snow tracks, softened the urgency, layered the mystery with time's silt, but it has not erased her. Cherrie lives in billboards and memories, in files marked unsolved and birthdays uncelebrated. She exists in the ache of an unfinished story. Until bones are found, or truth is confessed, or a door opens revealing the impossible, this mystery remains open, raw, and deeply human. And in that fracture where truth lies buried, the world still holds its breath for Cherrie, the girl who stepped off the bus and disappeared into America's longest echo. In stories like these, time is both the thief and the accomplice. 40 years have passed, yet Cherrie Mahan's name remains a question mark stitched into the American psyche. Her image, once just a child's school portrait, has become an archetype, the lost daughter. The infinite question, the headline that refuses to fade. We live in a world now of fingerprints on smartphones, of satellites that see what humans cannot. And still, the trail of the girl who walked into the woods of Pennsylvania ends in an unmarked silence. Perhaps the greatest tragedy is not that she was taken, but that someone somewhere still walks free, carrying a secret heavy enough to break the sky. And so, the story does not close. It waits, patient and breathless, tucked between snowflakes and forgotten files, for Cherrie, for justice, for that one missing link that will one day return light to where darkness dared to linger too long. In the heart of every unsolved case lies a breath suspended, waiting to be exhaled. Cherrie Mahan's disappearance is not a closed chapter but a living, reaching thread tied to the lives it fractured. Her face remains not in fading posters but in the resilience of a mother's voice and the eyes of strangers who pause too long at similar smiles. This story has always belonged not just to one family but to a nation learning how to grieve the unspeakable. And so, the ending has not come, not because it was forgotten, but because the pages are still being written. Somewhere, someone carries a detail, a memory, a truth. Somewhere, Cherrie still calls from the past, piercing the veil between what was lost and what might still be found. Until the silence gives way, until justice speaks, her story will remain what it has always been, a whisper in the cold, a name on the wind, and proof that some echoes never fade. There's something about February, light, thin, pale, reluctant, that makes memories sharper, more unforgiving. On the anniversary of Cherrie's disappearance, that light returns like a ritual, casting long shadows across an old driveway where innocence once ended. Over the years, strangers have left flowers, snow-dusted stuffed animals, and handwritten notes at the bus stop that no longer bears her footprints. Some speak to her ghost. Others speak to the sky. All speak against forgetting. With each passing year, the world may lose a little more clarity on the evidence, the names, the formal reports, but it gains something else too, a collective resolve. This is no longer just the story of a missing girl. It is the story of a wound that refuses to scar over, a chapter we continue turning not for closure, but for truth. And until that final clue surfaces, until that last breath of silence breaks, Cherrie Mahan will echo across calendars, counties, and generations, not as a lost child, but as the question history still dares us to answer. In the still aching silence that stretches between winters, Cherrie's story reverberates not only through the documents and interviews, but in the soul of America's missing. Her name is etched into the DNA of hope and heartbreak, a symbol of the fragile fragility of childhood and the terrifying swiftness with which it can be stolen. And now, 40 years later, the question isn't merely what happened out there on that quiet road, but why answers remain buried while time marches on unpunished. Somewhere behind closed lips and long-forgotten roads, the truth still pulses, waiting. Perhaps one day, the right memory will be stirred, or the final piece will fall into place like the last snowflake in a perfect storm. Until then, Cherrie Mahan remains the girl whose footsteps never faded, the face still calling from faded flyers, and the voice trapped in the twilight between justice and silence. And as long as that voice whispers against the wind, the world will keep listening, refusing to close the book. Even now, in moments when the world feels quieter, when a snowflake pauses midair or a streetlight flickers at dusk, it's hard not to wonder if somewhere, Cherrie Mahan remembers. Not just her name, but the sound of the school bus brakes, the feel of her wool mittens, the way her house looked from the hills she never crested. Time has tried to erase her, but hearts have refused. In homes across Pennsylvania and beyond, her story is still shared at dinner tables, whispered in living rooms, when news breaks of other disappearances. It is not closure they speak of, but courage, the enduring strength of a mother who never gave up, of a town still listening, and of a little girl who walked into legend. Until the silence breaks, until the woods give back what they took, Cherrie Mahan remains more than missing. She is the heartbeat of a question still unanswered, the snowflake that has yet to fall, the ending still waiting to be written. And yet there is something eternal in stories that never bring closure, a permanence not granted even to history's completed tales. Cherrie's name persists because it is missing, because the spaces between her known footsteps and her vanishing echo, louder than most endings ever could. Her image is not frozen only in time, but woven into the cultural fabric of our greatest fears and smallest hopes. Children still step off buses in towns just like Winfield. Parents still wait at windows, hearts skipping for each second. A familiar shape doesn't appear, and somewhere, perhaps even closer than anyone guesses, the truth waits not to be discovered, but to be revealed. Like a breath held too long, or a snowstorm paused mid-fall, someday, maybe soon or maybe never, the silence will crack. And when it does, Cherrie Mahan's voice, small, brave, and unforgettable, will finish the sentence that started in 1985, the sentence no one has been able to complete, one that ends not in absence, but in truth. So we return, full circle, to that icy afternoon in February, where a 9-year-old girl stepped off her school bus and into the arms of an unanswered question. The snow may have melted, the trees grown taller, and faces aged beyond recognition, but the moment itself remains untouched, sacred in its tragedy. Cherrie Mahan is not just a missing person case, she is a wound in the American storybook, a chapter that refuses to close. And until justice catches up with the past, until a voice rises with the long-withheld truth, her story lives on as a heartbeat in the dark, as a breath held across time, as the flickering hope that someday, somewhere, someone will speak the final words. Not just the ones that reveal what happened, but the ones that finally let her come home. But until that day, the world must live inside the unfinished. It must hold space for the child who never aged, the photograph that never changed, the mother who never stopped listening for footsteps on the porch. Cherrie Mahan's case is more than history. It is a mirror, reflecting how easily light can be extinguished and how fiercely it can be kept alive. In the quiet hush of snowfall, and in the trembling voice of those who still speak her name, a promise endures. That even if justice delays, remembrance will not. That even if silence stays, love remains louder. And that somewhere, whether in truth discovered or peace finally made, Cherrie Mahan will come home not just to the house she never reached, but to a world that never truly let her go. Perhaps that is what keeps this story breathing, after all these years, the unrelenting refusal to forget. Cherrie's name is spoken not only in sorrow, but in defiance of despair, a shield against the slow fade of injustice. Her legacy has transcended the yellowed pages of old case files to become a symbol of a nation's unfinished business with its past. In the gentle persistence of her mother's voice, in cold case teams still thumbing through decades-old files, in candlelit vigils held by strangers who never knew her, Cherrie has never been alone. She is the soul of every child who never made it home, the haunting reminder of fragility, and the banner beneath which hope still marches. And so long as that hope endures, she is not forgotten. She is not erased. She is still walking home beneath falling snow, still cresting the hill toward her front door, still held in the arms of a world not yet done listening for the truth she left behind. In the end, it is silence that remains the cruelest accomplice. Not the snow, not the stranger, not the van with the skier ice skating across memory, but the still, punishing quiet that time has refused to break. Cherrie Mahan's name is whispered now not just in grief, but in reverence, carved into the marrow of a story that spans generations. Hers is the kind of absence that changes how we see the world, how we guard our children, how we carry our questions. A light left burning in a window for 4 decades, undimmed by rain or disbelief. As another year passes, and the frost returns to that lonely stretch of road, we are reminded once more that some stories are not meant to end in certainty, but in remembrance. And maybe that is the closest we come to justice, until truth dares to show its face at last. Cherrie Mahan is still missing, but she is not gone. Not in this story. Not in this world. Not yet. So the snow keeps falling, gentle and unchecked, blanketing the same hills where innocence was last seen walking. It knows nothing of justice or memory, and yet it covers the earth like silence itself, each flake another second since Cherrie disappeared. In that place where her footprints should have been, time continues not as healing, but as haunting. And perhaps that's where her story lives now, not just in old files and quiet anniversaries, but in that contradiction. A young girl who vanished in daylight, leaving behind no answers, only echoes. Cherrie Mahan is still out there in the thoughts of the mothers who linger at the window, in the hearts of strangers who know her name without knowing her face. The case remains open not because it must, but because it cannot close. Not while the snow still falls, not while the questions still breathe, not while a mother still waits, and not while the world remembers the little girl who should have come home. And so, for every child who steps off a bus alone, for every parent who waits at the edge of a driveway, Cherrie's story rides quietly alongside them. The world may never know the name of the person who took her, may never find the van or walk the woods with revelation in hand, but it will know this: she mattered. Her absence changed things. Her image lit fires in the dark that still burn today. In preserving her story, we preserve not just memory but meaning. Her silence has thundered through 4 decades of change, calling out from snowy hills and postal flyers, from shattered timelines and undelivered justice. Perhaps, in one final twist, it won't be DNA or confession that ends this search, but something smaller, quieter, a name remembered, a memory stirred, a voice finally freed. But until then, Cherrie Mahan remains not missing, but awaited, not a closed chapter, but a pulse held within the heart of every story still unfolding under February skies. So for now, Cherrie walks the edges of stillness, not as a forgotten missing child, but as a symbol of every answer denied and every story left mid-sentence. Her name lingers not only in the pages of case files or candlelit vigils, but in the very fabric of how we remember, how we grieve without knowing, how we hope against all odds. For every footstep that never reached home, for every parent who dreams of reunions in sleep's fragile veil, for every investigator who whispers her name in aging breath, Cherrie Mahan is the echo that never died. She lives in the in-between, in that cold heartbeat between what we know and what remains unsaid. And though 40 years have passed under the turning wheel of seasons, the world still waits, watching gentle snowfall, listening for truths buried by time, praying for a reckoning that will come late, but never too late. She was taken, she is missed, and she is, forever, loved. And perhaps that is how it will end, not with a siren, not in headlines, but in a hush, a quiet return, or a quiet truth finally laid bare. Maybe someone, somewhere, will sit across from a detective, and after 40 winters of silence, say the words that snap the world back into motion. Or maybe not. Maybe the answers will never come, and Cherrie Mahan's name will drift forever in the space between tragedy and myth. But in either fate, she remains more than what was lost. She is the reason safety got louder, the reason mothers hold longer, the reason vacant school bus stops still sting with invisible presence. Love has fought against forgetting, and grief has stood tall across decades. In this way, Cherrie's story is not about vanishing. It is about the unrelenting presence of those who never stop searching. And that, in the end, is its own kind of justice. One that says, she was here. She is still here. She always will be. So as the winter sun fades once more behind those quiet hills where a little girl once stepped into vanishing, the story of Cherrie Mahan settles not into an ending, but into an undying vow that her name will continue to stir hearts, her absence will continue to ask questions, and her face will remain, immortal in its youth, on every wall touched by those who remember. This isn't closure. It's not justice. Not yet. But it is memory turned monument, pain transformed into perseverance. Cherrie Mahan is no longer just the girl who went missing. She is every moment we refuse to look away, every step taken in the search for answers, and the soft, steady heartbeat in the long silence of the unsolved. As long as winter returns and hope does not yield, her story isn't over. It echoes, it endures, and it waits alongside us all for the day someone finally dares to break the silence. Until that day emerges through the mist of years and silence, let her name continue as it has always been, a call unanswered, but not unheeded. Cherrie Mahan walks not just through memory, but through the moral fabric of a world undone by one terrible absence. Her story is our story, too, one of longing without end, questions posed to the heavens, and hope that blooms in the frost. We do not know if this chapter will ever close, or if her voice will ever return from behind that final veil. But we do know this. Cherrie left a mark beyond her years, beyond her disappearance, beyond even the justice she was denied. And in that truth, she survives, in every shared memory, in every search that never ends, in every snowfall that seems to carry her name. She is eternal not because she vanished, but because we never stopped looking, never stopped loving, never stopped believing, and never, not once, forgot. And so, as the wind curls through the pines of Winfield one more time, as the shadows stretch long across the place where a child once walked, we conclude not with silence, but a vow kept alive by a mother's relentless heart, by searchers who never ceased, by a nation that paused long enough to remember her name. Cherrie Mahan, taken too soon, remembered forever. Let her story be told again and again, not as a simple mystery, but as an enduring refrain of love unanswered. Because sometimes, the only justice left is memory, and in that memory, she lives. In that memory, she waits. And in that memory, Cherrie Mahan walks home not in reality maybe, but in the unstoppable beat of those who still believe, still ache, and still hold her close in the snowfall of each passing year. Year after year, The seasons change, the files grow thicker, and the silence grows heavier, but Cherrie Mahan remains. Not in the crime statistics or fading newspaper ink, but in the intimate, aching moments invisible to the world. She lives in the whisper of a name etched quietly into snow, in the candlelight that flickers each February with more resolve than despair. Her story is no longer only about what was taken on that cold afternoon, but about what was built in its place, a legacy of persistence born from heartbreak, a quiet revolution stirred by remembrance. And though justice has not yet arrived, though the van remains a ghost and the answers remain elusive, something else has endured longer than the mystery: hope. Hope that bends, but does not break, that refuses finality, that clings to the faith that someday, somehow, Cherrie will return. And until then, her name is said like a prayer, her face carried like a flame, because forgetting is never an option when love, like snowfall, keeps falling. And in the final breath of winter, when even time seems to pause and listen, Cherrie Mahan's story remains unanswered, but unforgotten. It echoes not just through snowy woods and empty driveways, but through every heart that has ever broken over a lost child. The world may never know who took her, or why no trace was left behind, but it knows this: love endures. It weathers decades of silence, sharpens with each year of mystery, and rises every February like frost on windows that still wait for her return. This is not just one girl's lost path. It is a relentless reminder that some stories do not end because they are not finished. Cherrie Mahan does not rest in peace because she does not rest at all. She moves in the prayers of her mother, in the determination of strangers, in the stubborn light of posters aged by rain and sun. And if one day the veil lifts and the truth is spoken at last, it won't bring her back, but it will bring her home. And that has always been the promise. That has always been the vow. Until that day arrives, the world turns on, carrying Cherrie Mahan within its quiet revolutions. Her name is woven through time, not like a relic, but like a thread that binds generations together in caution, in courage, in compassion. Schools still teach children how to protect themselves using lessons born from her loss. Parents still hold their young ones tighter in the cold morning light. And somewhere beyond the veils of memory and time, perhaps she walks too, unseen but deeply felt, her presence lingering in every snowfall, every paused moment, every breath that catches when an old photo resurfaces. This is where her story lives now, in the space carved out by those who never surrendered to the silence. In every heartbeat that hopes and every voice that remembers, Cherrie Mahan lives on, not vanished, not erased, awaited. Forever the girl who walked off the bus and into the unending search for truth, forever loved, forever home, wherever that truth may finally lead. And maybe that is the truest legacy Cherrie Mahan leaves behind, not a solved mystery, not a courtroom reckoning, but a call that still echoes, bridging decades with undiminished urgency. Hers is the face that reminds a weary world that some questions deserve more than silence, that some lives demand remembrance louder than resolution. As fresh snow hushes the hills of Winfield once again, those who remember her do not ask for miracles. They ask only for light to fall, finally, in the places where darkness once stood unchallenged. They ask for truth to take its first trembling steps on the long journey home. And until it does, her name will remain where justice one day intends to arrive, on the frost-bitten edge of memory, in the quiet strength of a mother who still believes, and in the undying space between what was lost and what still, somehow, waits to be found. Cherrie Mahan is missing. But she is never gone. Not in love. Not in time. Not in the souls that still carry her forward. And so the story ends not with answers, but with endurance. Cherrie Mahan's name remains suspended in a world that often forgets too quickly and forgives too easily. But she is not forgotten. Her face still lingers at the margins of minds, her memory etched into the cold breath of February, her presence stitched into time like a thread that refuses to break. This final note is not an ending, but a carrying forward, a declaration that even after 40 winters, justice has not been buried, only delayed. As long as the snow falls on that quiet road, as long as a mother wakes wondering, As long as strangers hold her name gently in their hearts, the search continues. Cherrie is not lost to time. She is cradled by it, watched over by remembrance, held aloft by love as unshakable as the hills where her story began. She walked into history that day, but history still waits, breath held, for her to walk back out. Somewhere between memory and myth, between sorrow and searchlight, Cherrie Mahan walks a path only the heart can trace. Hers is not just a case buried beneath the weight of years. It is a pulse that never quieted, a question that never lost its sharp edge. And though justice may have lost its way amid snowy pines and blurred memories, love has never faltered. It holds fast, like a light in a distant window, waiting not for an ending, but for her. So as another year slips into the hush of winter, and that lonely bus stop stands watch beneath a pale sky, we whisper her name not in mourning, but in promise, that she will be remembered, that her story will never be shelved, that one day the silence will give up its grip, and the girl who vanished will be more than a shadow in snowfall. She will be found. She will be home, and the long echo of her absence will finally, quietly, become peace. Because some stories are too loud to die, even in silence. Cherrie Mahan's name hums beneath the surface of each unsolved crime, echoes through every newscast that ends in, "The suspect remains at large." Her tale has transcended time to become something elemental, a kind of sorrow woven into the wind, a lantern flickering in the bones of winter. It is not closure we carry forward, but conviction that her story, born from tragedy, now serves as armor for mothers, for children, for justice too long deferred. And if one day the veil does lift, if the truth finally steps forward from beneath layers of time, it will not be applause that rises. It will be a quiet exhale, a breath held for 40 years released into air, finally warm enough to carry it. That will be the moment Cherrie Mahan is no longer missing. That will be the moment she comes home not to a door, but to a world that, through love alone, kept her name alive long enough to finish the story. And now, as the final snowflake settles on the ground that once cradled her last known steps, we close not the case, but the chapter that stands in reverent pause waiting for truth to rise from silence, for time to bend under the weight of memory made strong. Cherrie Mahan's story does not vanish with the years, it deepens, layering into the collective soul of those who still believe that one day the missing will become the found. In every unanswered whisper, in every parent's quiet prayer, her heartbeat endures. This is not goodbye. This is the moment we hand her story forward to the next eyes that see, the next heart that breaks, the next voice that dares to ask again. She has never been just the girl who disappeared. She is, and always will be, the question that changed us. And until the answer speaks, we will listen. We will remember. We will wait. Because love never forgets. And so, beneath drifting snow and slowly turning skies, the story of Cherrie Mahan closes not with certainty, but with grace. A grace forged in the aching resilience of a mother's love, in the tireless pursuit of strangers moved by nothing but empathy, in the silent communion of a nation that still whispers her name. 40 years have passed, yet she remains not only in memory, but in movement, in purpose, in the quiet promise that every lost voice is still worth listening for. This is the final frame, the lingering image of a child stepping off a bus and into the lore of a nation not strong enough to forget. Though the roads remain empty and the woods undisturbed, her spirit still walks among us, asking not just for answers, but for remembrance. The story waits as we do, hearts open, breath held, eyes watching the horizon, believing that someday, love will lead truth home, and Cherrie Mahan will no longer be the girl who vanished, but the miracle that memory never let go. So let this be the echo that carries Cherrie Mahan forward, not in tragedy alone, but in the steadfast memory of everyone who refused to let time erase her. As snow continues to fall over the hills of Winfield, as the silent road lies undisturbed beneath bare branches reaching skyward, Her name endures like breath in cold air, visible, fleeting, sacred. We may never know the full story, may never unearth what lies buried beneath decades of silence, but what remains is sacred all the same. The relentless love of a mother, the unyielding bond of community, and the legacy of a little girl who stepped off a bus and into a nation's heart. Her story is a light we carry carefully, wrapped in hope and unforgotten sorrow. And as that candle burns, season to season, year to year, may we never stop waiting, never stop asking, and above all, never stop remembering. Cherrie Mahan is missing, but because we remember, she is never truly gone.